like to use a microphone, even though it's such a small space, is that we can talk casually. It feels a lot easier. But anyway, thank you for coming today. I'm so glad that everybody's shown up for Elise and supporting this show. It's a pretty fabulous show. And I just thought, instead of me saying words, I wanted to ask Elise some questions. And I thought it would be interesting for you also, and then at the end we could have a little Q&A. But Elise, so I did a little reading and read some articles about Elise, and I read that when you were a child, your mom used to volunteer at the library, and that she would bring art books home at a young age. And so you were exposed to art from a very young age. And so I was wondering, is there like a specific piece of art, a painting, or something that you remember as a child, like your first sort of piece of art that you actually remember?
I don't know if it was like from when I was a little child, but when I first went to the Met, I think it was really Seurat's A Sunday at Le Grand Jatte that totally captivated me, and it was because of the pointillism in that. And I just was like, I just kept going back to the museum to see that one, and I got to see these things in person, so that was like a big one. That was about when I was like 9. I think it was really like, what's that? And then I had access to see it in person, so that was a pretty big one. And Seurat was like my favorite as a kid, but so was Underdog. The cartoon.
I think that sort of was thinking about, and I don't know for anyone else if you remember this. It's just interesting to think back when you were a child, but if there was also a moment where you really noticed color, maybe this was the same time, but.
Yeah, I actually, that's why I mentioned the Underdog part. Because that was it. Yeah, I watched this cartoon called Underdog, and he had a red suit and a blue cape and a bright gold U on it, on the red suit. And I loved red and gold from that point on.
Oh, I see that.
So I also read that when you were about 15 or 16 that you were in a car accident. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that. I don't want you to have to relive it and experience any trauma. But just in terms of, like, it took a long time to, there was a lot of rehabilitation after that. So I just kind of wondered, how did that car accident, did it have an impact on your life? Because I'm thinking about, as an artist, there's a couple of requirements, basically. Time alone, knowing how to be by yourself, and patience maybe. But I'm just wondering if you could tell us, like in your words, like how did that experience, or did it have an impact on your life now as an artist?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a very life-changing moment in my life. I think that's when I became an artist, because I'd always liked to make art, and I was wanting to be a professional dancer, and I was dancing with the dance company, and I was really getting into it. My dad was taking me into all the shows, and I was really on that track, and it was really, I was like grieving that I couldn't do that anymore, and I just started drawing more to pass the time. And the other thing about the solitude is that I'm the youngest of 3 children, and my siblings were much older, so I actually became very solitary as a kid when I was 8, because everybody was gone, and so I became an only child. And then with the car accident, I was recovering, and my mom would bring home books from the library, and she would say,
drool and like just spend some time, you're gonna have to just stay in the bed. I mean, you gotta, go to your physical therapy. So
That's really how my mom talks. And I remember I drew a picture of this hurricane lamp, a very realistic picture of a hurricane lamp. And then later in life, my sister, when I was like 25, she gave me a hurricane lamp because she remembered the drawing. And I don't know where the drawing is, but yeah, it did have a huge impact on my life, and I kind of made a realization at a young age that you have one shot, and you should take it no matter what. So you should just do and be true to everything that you want to do. You should just do it because you don't know how much time you have left. And it was a real big wake-up call for me. It was a head-on collision with a drunk driver, and it was before MAD, just before Mothers Against Drunk Driving. It was 1982, a week before Christmas. I lost about 8 bones in my nose and had to have it reconstructed and crushed my kneecaps. And yeah, so it was just devastating. But now I'm like able to do things like physically, like I'm amazed that I can like run and do things, and so it's really, but that was a big one for me.
So that kind of leads into my next question, which I'm really curious about, which is running. You're a runner, is that right? I mean, you actually run on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So what is, for you, is there a connection between running and creativity or running and your art?
Yeah, a lot of things are born out of running. Like a lot of it, like allows me to empty my brain, and at that and taking baths, like are the two things where where my ideas incubate in those two places. And so I kind of have to have that, and in some capacity. I know I'm, going to be 60, and I'm not going to be able to keep running forever. But I mean, I keep trying. Like every decade that comes along, I'm like, maybe this will be the time. Maybe I'll stop now. I just keep going until something tells me I shouldn't go anymore. But it really does feed my head, and it helps me tremendously with stress and to just cope with all of the things that I'm doing in my life. And people say, how do you do it all? And it's like, well, I just try to physically take care of like what I need to do that way, and then it alleviates stress so that I can kind of deal, so I can cope. And it's also really good for, depression and, all of that, and, not being on medication and just self-medicating. And so it's a big part of everything, not just making art, but it definitely has, so many ideas have come from just being on that trail and just, like getting the endorphins going, and it's like ideas just come.
Running, just getting up and getting out, you have to have a lot of self-discipline. And I think as an artist, people think, from an outside point of view, like, oh, it's so easy, you just, paint some But you have to be incredibly self-disciplined to be an artist. And there's so much involved in being an artist, not just the work, but, framing and photographing your work and so on. There's so much to it. So, I can see how running and having that discipline would really help your artwork. And I read something about you had a number of mentors when you were, you'd moved to Portland from the East Coast, went to PSU. One of them, I think, was Mel Katz. Is that right? It's just interesting. We have a piece of Mel's sculpture in our sculpture park. So on your way out, please go to the sculpture garden and have a look. But how did, having mentors, like, how did that help you? Like, how did it,
Well, it stems from the car accident, because right when I got into my, I went back to school, I went to this girls' academy. The population of the graduating class was like 48. And my art teacher started his first job at my school and I had just had my accident, and I couldn't take gym anymore. And he was a fresh graduate from Cooper Union, and he just did everything to like help me, to move me along, and he was it, Mr. Marrero. He was the guy. And he just helped me so much. He entered me into competitions. He showed me how to navigate, and he was just like, look at these magazines, look at the ads in the backs of the magazines, get familiar with this, go here, go to the Met, go to the MoMA, take your weekend, take the train, go with your friends, whatever, laugh at the sculptures, whatever you want to do. But he's like, just go and do that. And so then I continued on. He inspired me to continue on, and I did win some competitions, and I got into some I was like 15 when I sold my first piece, and then I moved to Portland, and Robert Dizano, who I feel like that empty chair there is his. He recently passed away, and he had emailed me and he said he was going to come, and he said, you've got to go and you've got to transfer from PCC here and go to PSU and study with Mel Katz, because he's from New York and he went to Cooper Union, and I think you would really get along great with him. And so I started taking his drawing classes, and after taking lots of drawing classes with Bob Pisano and also met Margaret Shirley at PSU, and then and he was incredibly pivotal for me. He just kept telling me to keep going, and he was very similar to my dad. He was really into jazz, and my dad is the New York scene of jazz and that whole time frame, that era in the world. And my dad took me to see Duke Ellington when I was 4, which is pretty crazy. And so from there, with Mel being such a great mentor and supportive of me, like he gave me the key to the Shattuck 211 room to just go in there anytime I wanted over the summer, because I didn't have a studio, so I could keep. And then everybody thought I was a grad student. Gilles was a grad student at the time, and everybody thought I was like in that crew of people, and I wasn't. So then when I graduated, I put all my science stuff at the end. So the last year I was just taking physics and environmental biology and all of those classes. And I was getting really concerned that I was gonna lose my studio, and what am I gonna do? So then I found my next mentor, who is Linda Ethier, and she's an amazing glass artist. Look her up, everybody, she's amazing. And she owns a double storefront building in Northeast Portland. And she said, she put an ad in the Willamette Week, and I was sitting there at my little work study job at PSU, and I called her up on the phone, and I said, well, I'm an artist and I'm going to graduate from college soon, and I don't want to be an artist that graduates from college and then doesn't have a studio and then doesn't do art anymore. So I'm trying to avoid that, and if you could help me. And she's like, well, let's see what we can do. And it was a storefront for rent. So I rolled my bike over. I rolled my bike right in there. And I had some snapshots of my work. And I said, this is my work, I need to do my work, and I need to live in this place that I do my work. And we went and looked at the storefront, and she said, well, you know how to use a drill? And I said, no, but I want to learn. And she was like, all right, well, we could take this table apart, and then we can take all this apart, and then we can put in some cabinets and a little fridge, and we can get you she got me a little Wedgwood stove. And I lived in that storefront a block away from the Laurel Thirst Pub for 4 years. And she was an incredible mentor to me. I would come home from school every day, and it was like she almost had my little English muffin snack like my mom. She'd be like, how was your day? How are you doing? I know it's really stressful to be in school right now. You're almost done. And then we had this huge graduation party at her compound, because it's like an L-shaped building with a courtyard garden in it, and all women lived there. It was an amazing place to be in my late 20s. And we had this huge party, and my parents came, and Mel came, and everybody met And then we went to dinner, and it was like, wow, this is so cool. This is like, oh, wow, this is like the best. My dad is meeting this guy, and they're like contemporaries, and they're so different. But it was just really great. And so having mentors like that, really, I mean, literally, you know, Linda was the one that bridged the gap between college and real life. And so what Linda did is she took me out to First Thursday. And she was like, here's First Thursday. These are the people. She was introducing me to everybody. And she's like, here's a copy of my CV. Look at my CV. This is how you're gonna type your CV. This is a computer. You're gonna use the computer. You're gonna do, like, she just had there's this thing called email. You're gonna have an email. Like, it was just like, you know, she gave me recipes for different wax combinations when I was concocting and teaching myself how to do encaustic painting. And some of them were really crazy recipes, but I still have some of the original things she gave me, you know, just to kind of like coax me along. And then, you know, she would trade my paintings for rent sometimes. And, you know, I mean, I was on food stamps. I would be getting plasma up the street every week, you know. I was doing everything I needed to do as a starving artist to get through college, to get myself through college. I put myself through college. So, yeah.
Wow.
That's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Like, it really is an amazing story.
Yeah, really.
Well,
crazy. And yeah, I mean, there's so many people in my
yeah,
life.
wow.
Just beautiful people in my
Wow.
life are sitting here. This is amazing.
Okay, well, let's see. We've been chatting for almost 20 minutes.
Yeah, so-
Would you like to just, tell us, I'm curious, where the word encaustic originates, and then maybe tell us a little bit about, choose whatever piece you're interested in, and take the microphone and just tell us a little bit about, how you begin. How do you begin a painting? And B, what does the encaustic process entail?
Yeah, this could be longer than 20 minutes. Okay, so
You can get up and move around if you want.
okay, so encaustic means to burn in, and it is an ancient medium that combines resin, beeswax, and pigment. But encaustic, meaning to burn in, you people, it doesn't mean wax. So it's beeswax, resin, and pigment, but the word encaustic itself means to burn in. And the medium originates from ancient Greco-Roman times, and it was adapted by the Greeks. The funerary customs of the Egyptians were adapted by Greeks in the desert of the Fayum, and there are these beautiful Fayum portraits that you can see, and they were discovered in the late part of the 19th century in the desert. So one of the most common questions that I get about the work is, will it melt? And I always say, well, the paintings were discovered in the middle of the Egyptian desert in the late 19th century. So they are impervious to moisture, so they outlive any oil painting, anything, because they hold in and they kind of capture the color. As long as you're using light, fast colors, it will pretty much stay exactly the same. And it has, I mean, some of the paintings that exist are from 23 BC, and these portraits, some I seeked them out at the British Museum recently, and I got to see 3 of them. One's still on the actual, casket or the sarcophagus. And they just hold up so well because of that imperviousness to moisture, and that wax is a preservative. So I'm painting with a preservative, essentially. And so I just started doing this because I saw a demonstration of it in college, and then the person that was demonstrating it, Susan Holland, the artist, she said, well, we don't have facilities here at VSU for this. And I said, oh, well, okay. And I was living in this storefront. So I thought, all right, I'll just get myself some wax and some resin and mess around with it. And I really did mess around with it. Like, I didn't tell Linda, but there was like a little bit of an ignition of something that I took care of quickly.
it's not flammable, it really isn't. It really isn't if you do it right. If you've got a 28-year-old experimenting in your studio, you do it correctly. But the flash point of this particular wax, beeswax, is very low, and that means that it's less flammable. So I combine it with resin, and the reason that you combine it with resin is to deoxidize it. Like when you see a candle and it's got that kind of powder on the outside of it, that's a candle that's just beeswax or wax without the resin in it, because it doesn't have that. So if I didn't use that in the wax, all of these would have a powdery surface over the whole front of them. So that's a really important property of the process, because it also hardens the wax as well. And the pigment can be used any way like you use in watercolor or acrylics or oils. And so you can thin the color, you can have it be primarily beeswax with just like a hint of color in it. And so that's what I like to do. I like to work with a lot of different tones of color and really build up the surface with texture. And I haven't abandoned oil painting either. I'm still very much like into oil painting. And it's mostly though as kind of an intaglio process, like in printmaking, where you put ink on a texture and then you take the ink off. So I use the paint in a similar way on the surfaces of my paintings. I'll make the textures this way, and then I'll put paint over it and take it off, and then it reveals this whole environment and this whole contour to me that I didn't, I can kind of see what I'm doing, but I don't consciously decide this is going to be this way. I lay down some information, and then I kind of, so the way I started painting is I kind of am initiating a conversation with my painting. And so I kind of say, I'm going to put this here. What do you think of that? And then I look back at it, and then it says, well, I think you should go this way with it. I think you should put these lines right here, and then maybe go back in and do this. And I just have this whole conversation and this narrative going on with each one, and that's why they're all they're all very much individual in that regard. So this one, I was trying to create a diptych where it kind of depicts the earth and the inner universe and then the outer universe on the other side. And I expressed it by doing encaustic on one and doing an oil painting on the other. So this is kind of what my oil paintings are like, and this is my oil paintings in college were very much like a lot of color and texture and line and manipulating the paint so that it did unpredictable things. And so this kind of exemplifies kind of how I would oil paint if I were to just do that, which I'm really starting to think of doing more and more. And I have, if you haven't noticed, I like maps. So I have a real fascination with maps. My dad was a navigator, and I just, he was a navigator in the sense that he told people how to drive into New York City. So it wasn't like this, like, man on a ship with, it was he had a warehouse job, and he was a traffic manager, and he managed the direction of many different trucks coming into New York. So I was always around maps, and my dad even had a map for like the trunk of our car when we drove to Florida, things like that. He was that guy, and he was very disciplined. And so I can attest that my discipline comes from my dad. He was an extremely disciplined person, and he's German. So it's just like those two things were they just clicked with me. So the way I start painting is I will gesso it, usually oftentimes with wax. But the other way that I do it is by putting down a print on the surface of the painting that I've made. And that is always something that has kind of been a map to the next step. These didn't come from a print. They are layered up wax, and I will build the surface up. And I really wanted these to be, a striking difference. So I came up with this element that's in between, which was, I lived 2 doors down from a woodworker at the time. And so he was willing to make all of these odd things for me. And this is an inset piece that he would make for me, and then I would pre-paint it, and I wouldn't be done with the piece, but then I would, he would affix it when I was finished with the piece. And the red, I wanted it to symbolize this kind of, like the change between the 2 places, like when you come to that pinnacle place and the horizon of the universes and how they would come together and meet. So I got into doing a lot of diptych work. I did a series of 10 of these. And then this one is based on photographs. I love looking at satellite photographs and drone photography. And so I saw these really amazing photographs of the Jupiter moon Europa. And this is kind of after the surface of the Jupiter moon Europa. This one I just went in with total reckless abandon because it was right at the beginning of COVID, and I just was like, everything's going to shit right now, and I don't know where I'm gonna be, I don't know what's gonna happen to my career, and I just put it all down, and I just felt this and then it just started showing me these environments, and I just went with it and I painted them, and that's kind of how I go in. This one was a very raw entrance to making it. And it was very quick. It was raw and fast, I remember that. And it just developed visually for me. I really use a term called visual cues. Visual cues are huge when it comes to painting abstractly. And what I mean by that is, when you look at a painting and you say, I think I see a face in there, I think I see a, right? So it's the same thing. It's like the cue is not necessarily a face, right? But I see the cue as, oh, this looks like a canyon or some kind of body of water on the moon. And so I'll accentuate that, and things like that. So that's kind of my intuitive way of working. This one is inspired by this documentary that I saw in 2012 called Chasing Ice by James Baylog, in which he set up 25 cameras on all of the major glaciers of the world and took pictures of the receding ice, and then showed up at the environmental conference and showed them this time lapse of it disappearing. And I was so struck by that, and reading some of Elizabeth Colbert's books about climate change, and I got very much into that, and I did a series of these that reflected that interest. And I wanted to, it arrived from a series of 9 pieces that I did that were all 10 by 8. And I thought, oh, it'd be great to have 9 of these size, that are an enlarged size of the glacier charts that I made, which there are still a few of those around. They're on my website, I think, but there are these little glacier charts that I did that were just glacier colored and just very abstract, but had a lot of texture and a lot of color embedded in them. And I just kept seeing this, there's this guy, Tom something on Instagram, just Google Tom. Tom.de or something he's an amazing aerial photographer. And I loved this, and it really this, and I've gone to the beach at Oswald West, and I took a bunch of pictures, and then I made this painting, and I made another one like it. But this one's very different, it's much more minimal, and I'm wanting more and more to go towards like just capturing the texture in a more whole way, and not making complex work like I have. It's been very complex and sort of intellectual, and it really doesn't have to hold all that. You know, you can just look at the picture and have it be, that's enough, this is enough, am I enough, this is enough, it's enough, right? I'm enough, right? Yeah. And then, okay, so this is another one I started. This one is a early one. You have to train yourself as an artist and not say it's an old one. You have to say, this is an early one. So this is an early piece of mine. From 2010 or 11, I think, yeah. And this was when they were doing the Hadron Collider research. And this was when I first made some larger encaustic collagraphs, because I also, in my spare time, started doing these, exploiting the texture of my paintings in the form of a print. So what that means is so if I were to say this wasn't framed and it was just on a flat panel, and I put ink all over it, and then I ran it through an etching press, there would be a print of this. So one day in my studio in 2003, I was like, oh, I should try rolling a rolling pin over my work and see what happens. And there wasn't enough pressure. So later, I went to a printmaking event and I tried it out with the late Bill Park. He entertained me and humored me by, like messing with the press so that I could get this right. And I got some good prints out of it, and all the Pica people have them, and I have never seen them again, and I didn't take any pictures because we didn't have phones with, like cameras in them. So that was when I first experimented with printing from the surface of my paintings. Then that became printing from a plexiglass plate, like you traditionally would as a printmaker. But I was so intimidated by printmaking that I was like, oh no, I'm not just a closet printmaker. I'm not gonna print, that's too complicated. Too many, lining of the paper and everything. And then I ran into Jane Paleollo, who we started working together. And we started working with these non-toxic inks. And I was like, I don't think they're gonna work. And she's like, I think they might work. And so we tried them. And these were like later on, like probably a couple years after I had done a bunch of smaller ones. And these were the first prints I made that were bigger in size, that were collagraphs made with the non-toxic inks. So then I mounted the print onto 3 different panels, and I bolted them together, and I put layers of wax on top, and I was the whole time listening to and reading about the Hadron Collider. So this is called Hadron Loop 3, and I still have the printing plates for all 3 of these. And that's the thing about encaustic. It lasts a long time, so you can make a collograph from encaustic, which is the printing plate, and then you can store that away and go back to it and print from it again a few times. And I've been doing that for a while now, and I've been teaching it also. So this is also another way that I started painting.
So what's the pressure like on because encaustic seems like it might squish. Is like
Yeah,
pressure
yeah.
have to be just right?
It does squish down after about 20 prints, but it holds up well because I also make a product called Wagner Encaustic Wax. And I put more resin in the formula, so it hardens it a little bit more. It's a really white wax so that you can kind of see the ink on the plate, because you know, printmaking with wax is not something new, but printmaking with white wax and combining it with encaustic techniques is pretty new. So that's kind of, you know, I just see how many times I can run it through. And then you can always let it dry, you know, clean it off, and then you can augment the plate later on. You can keep working back into it and bringing the texture back up. And oftentimes you don't even need to put more wax on it. You can just, you know, work with what you have there. So that's how I did this. And then this one over here, and these three are all, they all started from large format encaustic holograph print here. And although this is an etching, so this is a dry point etching that I printed onto paper, and then I mounted it onto the painting, and then I put layers of wax on top of that. And the same thing with these two as well. And then this one in 2018, I kind of reached a certain rock bottom in my feeling of like pursuing art or continuing with my art. And I made a series of this size painting, and I just, sometimes you just go into the studio and you just say, I just don't care anymore. I am just gonna do whatever it is I wanna do. And some of the best work came out of that. So I think sometimes when you get to the bottom, there's, you know, it's really true that the only way is up from there. So that's a pivotal series of pieces I did. And then this, I was so inspired by the photographs that came out in 2017 of oh God, what is this called? Pluto, yes, the surface of Pluto. There was this, literally an exact photo. If you just Google Pluto images, this photo came up, and I was like, oh God, that's amazing. And it was going along, like I was just finished my 10-part series of those, that diptych there. And I thought, oh, I want to do like a whole bunch of these diptychs of that image, exactly, or an interpretation of it. And so I did three paintings like this one, not all exactly the same, but similar in composition and concept. And now I've been like thinking about this right here, like all day, all day. I was like right, Gabe, when I woke up this morning, I was just like, I know what I'm gonna do next. And so, yeah. So I'm really thinking about just making more expansive, like entire surface areas of very minimal, but I remember how I did that, and that's the key. Like with art making, and Janice, you should tell your students this, just write it down, just remember, because you'll have these moments that are totally spontaneous, and you'll be like, oh, how did I do that? I want to do that like 100 more times. So just write it down in your head, whatever you need to do, and then it will develop, and it will get better and better and better and mature and become something exciting that you're really proud and passionate about doing. So I think that's everybody. Okay. In my head, and it's a particle collision image, you know. And the thing that's been challenging about working with the image, because I just got done with a series of paintings that I worked with it a little bit more, and they're mounted prints also in my Seattle show, is that I kept not wanting to see this painting winking at me. You know, it was like making this face at me, and I was just like, don't do that, don't make that face. And I kept doing these things to make the face go away. It's just funny how you interact with your work, you know, how you're constantly like stop doing that. I'm gonna go away now. I'm gonna go do this over here. And they just become your little friends in the studio, you know. I walk in every day and I'm like, hi everybody, how's it going? Are we drying up nicely? How's it going over here? Yeah, so yeah, it's just a pleasure to be an artist in the world. So I thank you for this honor to have a show here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Elise, and just thank you all for coming and being here and supporting Elise and coming to hear her speak.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we have over there some yummy food, and if you would like to, oh, you have a question.
Is it okay to ask questions still?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we can
Okay.
take more questions.
Yeah, yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
So, the one thing you haven't talked about is the influence, where did you get your influence, your passion for science, the themes that you put in?
Yeah, I think it really originates from just seeing the byproduct of science and the photos they take of these things they can't see, and that's like a byproduct of their research, and that to me is the art. And I just always loved seeing how artists and scientists are both working within the realm of mystery. And that's always been something that's inspired me to keep going and kind of made me feel like the world is my oyster, because there's always going to be scientific research that you can tap into, that you can learn about, and that you can be, you know, that you can interpret and be a part of. So that's pretty much how. I don't know. I think it was just taking all the science classes to, you know, in that last year of college. And I was like, how can I make this interesting? You know? So that was a big part of it too.
What percentage of the pieces that you start end up as finished work? As somebody who has trouble finishing things.
Yeah. All of them? Yeah. There's always that residual stack in the corner of things that I just kind of because creativity and flow, those are the two books, excellent about how we get stuck and we get hung up, and making art can help you move through things and get to the end. And it's such a big part of life, making, creating, for me, and that's such a key to it. Whatever, but the good thing is that it's a very forgiving medium in that way, where you can, you know, there aren't any mistakes, there are just happy accidents. So it's also the way you look at it, you know, the way that you approach it, the way you think about it. I don't really think about mistakes. I think about, oh, how could I use this mistake as an opportunity? You know, so it's just a mindset thing. Yeah.
You said several of these came from images from satellites.
Mm-hmm.
This one here of
Mhm.
the universe, was that an image or was that a thought?
That's all. This is
That.
Yeah, this is an image of, if you just Google particles images, you'll see a lot of things like this.
So that
But
was
this-
more inner space than outer space.
Well, it's outer space in the way that I'm trying to paint something that you can't see.
Right. Yeah, no, I
Right.
get that.
Mm-hmm.
But that image came from something that was just particles.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's just deeply inspiring to me. I think it's just that there's something about what we see and how, you know, the world is real to us, but yet there's a certain abstraction to it, and there's a certain intangibility about it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do a lot of the time with my work.
So,
We had, oh, sorry. The two of us came up with one other question. Did you use what do we call it?
Tracing.
A tracing
Oh,
wheel?
yeah, I
You
used
did
a cell
those.
tracer. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
We need
Oh,
it.
yeah. No, I'm not gonna be doing that kind of pointillism.
Well,
I
it was
liked
so
I liked
even.
it as a kid. Jill.
There you go.
On the heel of what you just said, is that why you have both the micro, the bubble chamber, and the macro, which is clouds or even cosmic imagery? So that's the source of that stretch, is that we see what we see and then what's underneath.
Right, exactly. It's bringing together the micro and the macro and putting them together. And I love negotiating that in my work. I don't know why. It just kind of happened.
And if I may comment, and this is what physicists tell us.
Jill is writing a book
The
about
here
this.
and the there doesn't exist.
Right,
We're everywhere at once.
we're everywhere at once, exactly. And so it's like in your fingernails, there are these like nanoparticles, like, you can't see them and they're all whirling around us everywhere. And, I wonder what kinds of beings can see them. I often wonder, like, I wonder if there's a being out there that can see all of this floating around. Probably. They're superior. Yes. All right, well, anything else? All right, let's have some nauseous and stuff.